Greetings and welcome to the broadcast. I'm your host. This is Prison News for August 2017, where we offer you a day's worth of prison reports that prove Jesus really was right. First up, a 300-pound muscle guy who helped reputed mobsters shake down delinquent debtors before turning on them and cooperating with feds is getting out of prison early. U.S. District Judge Eddie Chang granted a request by prosecutors Tuesday to reduce the sentence of George Brown. Last year, Chang gave Brown 2 years in prison based on his substantial cooperation with the government. Brown began serving his time last September. Since his sentencing, prosecutors say Brown has cooperated even further. However, they have only described that cooperation in a sealed document filed with the court last week. And as a court hearing to consider the request began early Tuesday, the judge said that he would keep proceedings public as long as they were clever about it. Then, noting that prosecutors had identified a, quote, important reason, Chang reduced Brown's sentence to time served and ordered Brown released from the Bureau of Prisons. Now, folks, only in Chicago could something like this happen, where a guy feeds information like this. I mean, let's just go to the next story. Man fresh out of prison hears violent car crash, minutes until curfew, saves baby dangling from car seat. Ex-con Josh Tagahol wanted nothing more than to stay out on the straight and narrow. A mere 3 months after a 17-year jail sentence for manslaughter, he was out on work release and subject to a strict curfew. So, when he and his girlfriend witnessed a terrible car wreck in downtown Spokane, Washington, during the evening of July 17th, he faced a ferocious dilemma. Should he speed home to stay within the terms of his release or help the injured strangers and risk going back to jail? Tagahol had happened upon the wreck, and he and his girlfriend were driving through the city. They noticed a car driving erratically, and he urged his girlfriend to follow it. The car then sped through an intersection at close to 60 miles an hour and struck a van, flipping it over. That vehicle contained the Rose family, which included mother Cora Rose and her 7-month-old son, Dante. That's when I looked at the clock and I was like, man, I need to get back because if I'm not back, I'm going to prison, Tagahol told KHQ. But as soon as he heard Dante howling, he knew what he had to do. I heard crying, but I didn't know there was a baby, he explained. The seat had become dislodged. The toddler was out of the harness on one side of the strap around its neck. The seat was upside down, so that baby was just hanging on it. It was terrifying. The baby was crying. It was really a tiny baby. The accident was so severe that it shut down traffic at a normally heavy congested part of the city for hours. Neither Tagahol nor the Rose family were aware at the time that the driver of the other vehicle was under the influence of alcohol and cannabis. Fortunately, Dante wasn't severely injured, and the rest of the Rose family looks likely to fully recover. Cora Rose credits Tagahol's fast action for that. I look back, I don't remember if I said it to him, she said to the Olympian. I saw his hat, his eyes. He told me, I have your baby and everything is going to be okay. I have your baby. In addition to drawing praise from several news sources, Tagahol has received accolades from a surprising source, the Washington State Department of Corrections, which held him up as an example on its Facebook page. Mr. Tagahol risked his freedom for another person, the Post stated. The Washington State Department of Corrections values and acknowledges that people have the need and the ability to grow and to change. Next. Albany, New York will spend $7.3 million from bank settlements, oh yes, bank settlements, to expand college education programs in prison, including Avalon Correctional Facility in New Orleans County. 7 colleges will begin continued or expanded offerings for prisoners at 17 correctional facilities across New York over the next 5 years as part of the College in Prison Reentry Program, a joint program between who? Governor Andrew Cuomo's administration and Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance. Now, folks, this thing is being cobbled up by a Manhattan district attorney, is up to his armpits in this thing. Let's go ahead and read some more. Among them are Mendale College, based in Buffalo, which will continue its program at Albion. By the way, this Buffalo, here in Buffalo, New York, if you've ever read, and we encourage you to go ahead and listen to the audiobook about Cortez when he came over in South America and took over, basically decimated the Indians and took over Mexico, southern Mexico. That's how this buffalo got its name. When he went up there, if you want to see his actual records are available to the public, there were such great swelling herds of buffalo. At one time, he couldn't get through for several days through an area while the buffalo massive herds went by. This isn't a joke. If you read it, it's hard to believe. It's even been sanitized out of some of the textbooks. Anyway, among these colleges are based in Buffalo, which will continue its program at Albion, which was launched in 2008. Cornell University, meanwhile, will be active in 4 correctional facilities. In all, there are 400 to 500 new seats each for a college education program. Now, folks, there's 2 sides of the story here. One is to do the right thing, the Christian thing, show, turn the other cheek. The other is, when you look at the people who've been offended, what we call the victims of these kind of crimes, their kids can't go to college. Their kids can't get an appointment with the governor. This Cyrus Vance, Manhattan District Attorney, his calendar's full if you ask him to come scholarship your boy or your girl to a college. However, when you get around election time, all of a sudden the money's available to take thieves, cutthroats, murderers, sycophants, and all the others and give them a free college education. That money can be found, but the money for the victims' families, you can't find money. The money for the veterans, returning vets, their kids need a little help, money's not available. It's a long, grueling process. But gee, thank you. Thank you, Governor Andrew Cuomo administration and Cyrus Vance, for diverting that money in the millions of dollars so criminals can get out with a college degree while the rank and file civilian population goes down the drain. And they wait, and they wait, and they wait. Folks, I can't read the rest of this. It talks about how they're trying to gin up public dollars to get more for the criminals, and how they already offer an actual business, a human license for them, whatever the heck that is. Now, what we're going to do is just show you how kids were trained and how, whether you were a criminal or a non-criminal or a child of a criminal or child of the mayor. It was called McGuffey's Readers. I have a copy right here. In contrast about what we've read here in the last couple of weeks, I'm going to read actually some of the excerpts from these textbooks. There were 4 or 5 textbooks. The actual value of these things is really high if you can find some original printings. But these textbooks were used to create good character. People say there were some cruelty to animals because animals in those days were made to behave, or, like if a dog bit somebody, that was not good. But we will stay away from that. We're just going to say some of these lessons. I'm going to turn back the clock, and they had a lot of stuff about God in it, a lot of stuff about saying your prayers, a lot of stuff about things like the good book, doing what's right, the Christian thing. It doesn't say cleanliness is next to godliness, but it might as well in these books. So I'm going to start off reading an actual poem they have here, and then we're going to go ahead and read a couple of stories that the kids 200 years ago learned, as opposed to being given a college education, which other kids will learn. I read, I know God made the sun to fill the day with light. He made the twinkling stars to shine all throughout the night. He made the hills that rise so very high and steep. He made the lakes and seas that are so broad and deep. He made the streams so wide that flow through wood and vale. He made the rills so small that leap down hill and dale. He made each bird that sings so sweetly all the day. He made each flower that springs alone, so bright, so fresh, so gay. And he who made all these things, he hath both you and me. Oh, let us thank him then, for good and great is he. All right, lesson, the old man. There once lived an old man in a snug little cottage. It had 2 rooms and only 2 windows. A small garden lay just behind it. Old as he was, the poor man used to work in the fields. Often he would come home very tired and weak, with his hoe or spade on his shoulder. And who do you think met him at the door? Mary and Jane, his 2 little grandchildren. They were too young to work except just to weed out in the garden, or maybe to bring water to the spring to him. In winter, as they were too poor to buy much wood or coal, they had only a little fire, so they used to sit close together to keep warm. Mary would sit on one end of the old man's knees and Jane on the other. Sometimes their grandfather would tell them a droll story. Sometimes he would teach them a hymn. He would often talk to them of their father who had gone to sea, or of their good, kind mother who was in her grave. Every night he prayed to God to bless the children, to bring back their father in safety. The old man grew weaker and weaker every year, but the little girls were glad to work for him. He had been so good to them. One cold, windy night, they heard a knock at the door. The little girls ran and opened it. Oh, joy to them! There stood their father. He had been at sea a long time. He had saved some money and had now come home to stay. After this, the old man did not have to work. His son worked for him, and his grandchildren took care of him. Many happy days they spent together. Okay, we'll take another. We've got time barely for one more. From McGuffey's Readers, the second eclectic reader, called The Greedy Girl. Laura English is a greedy little girl. Indeed, she is quite a glutton. Do you know what a glutton is? A glutton is one who eats too much because the food tastes good. Laura's mother is always willing she should have as much to eat as is good for her, but sometimes when her mother is not watching, she eats so much it makes her sick. I do not know why she's so silly. Her kitten never eats more than it needs. It leaves the nice bones on the plate, then it lies down and goes to sleep when it's had enough to eat. The bee is even wiser than Laura. It flies all day among the flowers to gather honey, and might eat the whole time if it pleased, but it eats just enough and carries all the rest to the hive. The squirrel, he eats a few nuts, maybe some acorns. He frisks about all over the limbs up there. He acts as though he's dined at a king's table. Did you ever see a squirrel with a nut in his paws? How bright and lively he looks as he eats it. If he lived in a house made of acorns, he would never need a doctor. He would not eat an acorn too much. He knew that eating the right amount is the best amount. I do not love little girls who eat too much. Do you, my little readers? I do not think they have such rosy cheeks or such bright eyes or such sweet, happy tempers as those who eat less. Now, folks, that might sound a little bit harsh, but if you go back to look at the tables of mortality and the height and weight of different kids and different things, you will find that there was a general understanding in the general population that gluttons ate too much and got fat, and that it really wasn't glands, or it was gluttony, or perhaps at home mother had too much sweets or was not cooking well-balanced meals. That's the kind of thing that takes place in these McGuffey's Readers. And, speaking of well-balanced meals, when I open up the Bible, there's always something in there, it seems like, about people eating. Jesus Christ, God's Son, would cook the disciples down by the sea. Sometimes he would broil the fish or cook the fish, I forget now, and some chips or some bread he would make down there. Sometimes Jesus taught using bread and wine for sacramental things as well. We know that Jonathan, a guy, maybe a little sweet tooth, he had a staff he would put in the honey and get the honey off of it, and he would have that. And then there's Ezekiel making that special bread. I believe it was wheat, corn, and millet and spelt. You can still buy that bread today, by the way. You can either go online somewhere, certain specialty stores have it. Sometimes it's referred to as Bible bread. Should you decide to read the Bible cover to cover, and let's just say you're one of these stubborns, I don't want to become a Christian, I don't want to, but you will read the Bible. Okay, how about this? Get a brand new notepad, no writing in it, get a nice pen that you like. Start on page 1, go through the whole Bible, and just write down the Bible recipes. Write down the beef, the wild game stews they made. Write down how Jesus made fish and chips. Write down the Bible bread, all the ingredients. Now, manna you're going to have a little trouble with, so we'll go ahead and pass that. And you're going to be amazed at how healthy that book is. Now, that's for your stomach. How about spiritually? Do you want to become even healthy spiritually? And the other side of that notebook, write down what Jesus says is right and what he says is wrong. And then take that next step and say, Jesus, I believe you got this information right from God the Father. I believe it because you said so. I trust you, Jesus. And by the way, you died for me. But that's not enough. You got to believe that he rose again. He arose from the dead. And also, he's coming back. He even tells you about the floods and earthquakes that take place before he comes back. Folks, it's time for the old prison bell to ring. I want to thank you for stopping by. This has been Prison News. God bless you all, and bye for now.